Hello everybody, I'm Cassidy, I'm the Hippie Catholic. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe to be part of the conversation. So this is a video I've been wanting to do for a really long time. A question I get a lot as a woman and as a Catholic is, why are you a Catholic? To be completely honest, the church hasn't had the best reputation when it comes to women's rights in general. I'm not only talking about issues of reproduction. I feel like that kind of deserves a whole other video. I did make one video discussing the abortion debate. I'll put that in the card above. And I'm planning on making some more in the future. I feel like that it's important to talk about. But despite portrayals in American media, the Catholic Church actually is not as bigoted against women as some other churches that I have seen. It's definitely not the best, but it's also not the worst. There are definitely a lot of spaces for women to thrive in the Catholic Church. Well, especially lately. The Catholic Church has been having, shall we say, a Francis effect. Pope Francis actually recently assigned a woman to a senior Vatican position. She'll be managing the Vatican's relationships with multilateral organizations such as the United Nations. So that's very cool. So while there's still much work to be done, there is still progress that's being made in the church. While women have been fundamental in building and maintaining the church, the clerical hierarchy and power structures are ultimately male dominated. We're seeing the tides kind of turn, which is cool. But this will make many Catholics and non-Catholics wonder, why can't women be priests in the Catholic Church? Or should we say, when were women priests? And that's what we'll be exploring today. This will definitely be a multi-part video, so stay tuned for that. Most Christians presume that women played little to no role in the Jesus movement or in the early church as it spread throughout the Mediterranean. But actually, women were strong leaders alongside the men in a variety of roles within the church. The early church in itself was very countercultural. It was a religion of women, slaves, artisans, and outcasts. This structure, or lack thereof, opened the door for spots of leadership to be filled by those the society at the time considered to be unconventional. While gender roles ruled over the ancient societies of the early church, like today, men and women were patrons and householders, which is pretty cool. Wealthy Greek and Roman women were responsible for the rise of Christianity. Saint Helena, the mother of Constantine the emperor, who made Christianity the legal religion of Rome, she converted Constantine, and she was the one that found all the holy places in Jerusalem that we can now visit today in the Holy Land. So thank you, Saint Helena, for doing that for us. Aside from her, there's still many women that were active participants within the church. We're actually going to go back and discuss the early church. Well, the first woman to respond to Paul's message in Acts 16:11 through 15 was Lydia, a householder and a businesswoman. But when Lydia converted to Christianity, her household was baptized together with her, which was an indication of her authority. Scholars have found pieces of evidence for women's leadership within the church. One of these I would like to discuss with you is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And while the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is not canon, it should be examined. Basically, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, St. Peter and St. Mary Magdalene were clashing over who was closest to Jesus and over who should assume the role of spiritual leader. While this is not considered canon, it's not considered a part of the Gospels, it's important because it illuminates that there was a conflict between men and women, and that men were trying to erase and change women's leadership roles within the church. Christian women were unconventional. I'm going to make a totally different video discussing Christian women gender roles within the early church because that deserves a whole other video. Our gender roles for women are not the same as the early church's roles for women, but we'll keep going. Back to when women were priests. Many Catholics may be watching this and going, whoa, that's too far. You're saying that Mary Magdalene acted as a priest, as a spiritual leader. Whoa, that's a bit much. There's a reason why only men are priests, and that is true. In Sacrifice as a Remedy for Having Been Born a Woman, Nancy Joy, a feminist scholar, connected the origins of male-led religious sacrifices as faux expressions of childbirth and menstruation found in women. Blood sacrifice is a phenomenon found around the world across cultures that had nothing to do with one another. The idea of childbirth and menstruation were viewed as unclean by many cultural traditions, including the ancient Jews. This is expressed in Leviticus and also in the book of Ezekiel. And they have troubling connotations towards women, that women in themselves are born unclean, each more unclean than the next. Yikes. Nancy Joy believes that rituals of blood sacrifice were created from a subconscious jealousy men have towards women, for women can give birth, a rather bloody process, and cis men, well, can't. In Jewish tradition, the Jewish lineage is passed down through the mothers. Men wanted to pass down their lineages in their own way. They also want to include blood, because blood is seen as very sacred and powerful and like the essence of life and such. As childbirth was only for women, blood rituals were only for men. The Eucharist followed in that tradition of blood sacrifice, but the Eucharist was revolutionary in the fact that it was also non-violent, which in a way mirrors menstruation, the only bloodshed without violence, but yet viewed with unrivaled taboo and revulsion even today. This is true, the text itself does not directly say this is a sacrifice, but it comes pretty close to it, and it's very heavily implied in the narrative of the Last Supper. The Last Supper is recorded in all 4 of the Gospels, but I'm going to focus on Matthew today. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Matthew 26:26 through 28. In this, Jesus describes the wine in particular as blood, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. This alludes to the blood sacrifices done in the Hebrew tradition, sacrifices which were done to appease God, so that God may forgive the sins of the Israelites. And this was a violent practice. What's, again, was revolutionary about the Eucharist is that it is non-violent. I'm going to put the link to Breaking in the Habits video all about the Eucharist, because he does a really, really good job at explaining why the Eucharist was and still is viewed as a literal sacrifice. So yeah, check that out in the description box below. It's also interesting that according to the Church, the transformation of the Eucharist, the primary duty of a priest, can only be done by men. As a Catholic, I believe that women should be able to be priests. I know that's probably controversial for many of you watching this, but I've looked into the scholarship, and I just believe that there's a basis for women to be priests scripturally and traditionally. And I'm actually part of an organization that advocates for women's ordination. Joy pointed out that the ritual of the Eucharist was passed down in hopes that the second coming of Jesus would be soon. As men performed blood sacrifices in the Hebrew tradition, this was probably one of the reasons why women did not participate in the blood ritual of the Eucharist, which was also viewed as a kind of blood sacrifice. Because, as I mentioned before, as childbirth was only for women, blood sacrifices were only for men. And this was a way for the church to establish succession, because blood rituals were passed down from father to son traditionally to establish family lineages. The apostles were passing down the blood sacrifice of the Eucharist to their metaphorical sons, their spiritual sons. But I want to also point out that the practice of only men being eligible to transform the Eucharist was not in itself a requirement. Instead, it was an adherence to another ancient gender role. Jesus never says only men can perform the Eucharist. I cannot speak on all churches, but I do know that the Catholic Church does not adhere to every passage in the Bible, but it takes certain texts into historical context. Also, the church just examines the time period in which those texts were written into account. Why won't they do this in the case of the priesthood, even though evidence points that all male clergy was an effect of the times and not a divine requirement? I do not know, honestly. Apostles who carried out the sacrifice did so according to their own pre-existing gender roles around ritual sacrifice. This does not mean that women have not played a role in the church and that they don't matter or anything like that. I mean, I'm a woman, I'm a Catholic woman. I am trying to promote Catholicism and just progressive Christianity in general and mysticism on YouTube, and I'm speaking for myself, and I find that to be rather empowering. I mean, you look at like the Catholic Worker and Flannery O'Connor and like different just really awesome women within the Catholic Church. I'm not by any means discounting any of them because they weren't priests, and that I'm not saying that they weren't strong women and that there aren't strong women within the Catholic faith. There certainly are. But what I am saying is that because there's such strong women within the Catholic faith, I feel like that women need to have a more active role. And if the church wants to continue on in the tradition of the blood sacrifice and saying that it's only for men, fine. Because there is a basis for that. I'm not going to lie, there is a basis for that. But if we can't be a part of that spiritual ritual, there needs to be a place for women to have an equal voice in governance within the Vatican. I don't see a reason for only priests and bishops and things like that to have their voices heard, while nuns and mothers and sisters are not heard equally and are not seen with as much respect. I feel that mothers and sisters should be viewed on equal levels with bishops and cardinals. There needs to be more equality in that way. I'm not gonna lie, there is a tradition that says that blood rituals are only for men. And if we want to adhere to that, again, I'm saying that I don't think that you really necessarily have to, but the church is so like big on following in the steps of the early church. If we want to do that, we need to still establish places for women to thrive and to have their voices be heard and to have our voices matter within the Vatican. Blood rituals were done with this intention in mind, to continue on male lineages. Are only men allowed to receive the Eucharist? No, because the Eucharist was not instituted only for men. The church must ask herself, what is more important, retaining unjust traditions or preserving the egalitarian spirit that made the church unique in the first place? After all, the church was heralded as a religion of women and slaves before lovely Saint Helena made it the official religion of Rome. I'm gonna say it's Saint Helena because there's no way Constantine would have found Christianity on his own, I'm just saying. And please consider supporting me on my Patreon account. As a small creator, I'm currently not monetized, so any donation would help this platform out immensely. But if you're not able to donate, that's totally okay. I'm only asking you to donate if you're financially able to do so. If you're not in that position, please consider sharing my videos with people who you think would enjoy my content. That helps the platform grow in diversity. After all, my motto is let's start a conversation. So let's start a conversation. Thank you so much guys for watching. I'm Cassidy, I'm the Hippie Catholic. God bless.